Some time ago, I watched a new Agatha Christie movie adaptation, that's On the Nile by Kenneth Branagh, and I was amazed by how Hollywood it was. And I'm not sure it's a compliment. So I decided, okay, to chase the aftertaste of this movie out of my mouth, I need to check out other adaptations of Agatha's fun and nifty detective stories, which preferably feel less like they were made by an AI to please as many people as possible. And also, please God, less Gal Gadot and Armie Hammer. Oh God. So I googled and found out that BBC has been making Agatha Christie adaptations for the past 5 years. Correction, I just realized that the first one was released in 2015, so it's 7 years already. But in my mind, 2015 was 5 years ago, so. And here they are. And then there were none, The Witness for the Prosecution, Ordeal by Innocence, The ABC Murders, The Pale Horse, and the latest, Why Didn't They Ask Evans? They were all produced by BBC, which means by the same bunch of people. However, the first 5 were scripted by Sarah Phelps, and the last one was written and directed by Hugh Laurie. I also have to note that I, regrettably or not, haven't read the original novels, so I will only be assessing all these miniseries based on how good they are and not how faithful they are to the original text. Side note, I generally think that we shouldn't judge a movie or TV series book adaptation solely by how accurate it is to the original text, because TV and cinema is a completely different medium and it works by a different set of rules. So sometimes a faithful adaptation just won't work. Or it could work, but the author just decides to choose a different path to tell the story, which is entirely acceptable and shouldn't be considered a transgression or something worthy of harsh criticism. So let's start. Number 6 in this top 6 is The ABC Murders. The ABC Murders was released in 2018 and it consists of 3-hour-long episodes. It follows a retired old Hercule Poirot as he tries to solve a series of killings by a mysterious murderer known only as ABC, who seems to know a lot about Poirot and his life. At first, I found the choice to cast John Malkovich in the main role quite bizarre. I don't know, maybe because I have an image of David Suchet in my mind, and Kenneth Branagh absolutely could not shake it. So Malkovich seemed like an even less convincing choice, but I was wrong. I love John's take on the character because it suited the overall atmosphere of the series. It's a much grittier, more grounded version of a famous detective. Here, he is a has-been who's trying to fit into newly emerging rules, and he's trying so hard to keep his relevance. But younger people are taking over, and for Poirot, this case, which directly involves him, feels like a lifeline. Also, just like with every one of these adaptations, I want to say that the cast is amazing. Apart from Malkovich, the ABC Murders have Rupert Grint, who I truly believe is the best of the child actors made famous by Harry Potter. Also Andrew Buchan, Tara Fitzgerald, as well as Ewan Farren and Anya Chalotra, as a treat for the Witcher fans, I guess. But why did I put the ABC Murders last? Frankly speaking, it's because it wasn't very engaging. The characters, aside from Poirot, failed to keep my interest, and I don't think it's the actors' fault. They just weren't very well written. Barely a caricature. The episodes dragged too much, and the plot twist could be seen from a mile, even for those who weren't familiar with the book. But the most annoying part for me was the flashbacks. Throughout the whole series, we are teased with flashbacks about Poirot's mysterious past, but there are too many of them, and every time they use the same shots without adding any new insights into what they're supposed to be about. By the end, the mystery of Hercule's past was just irritating, and I couldn't truly appreciate the final reveal. Nevertheless, with all these flaws, it's a solid series. Now, I know that people who read the book are very critical of it because apparently it deviates a lot from the original, but then again, I'm judging the final product, the series on its own, and not how well it illustrated the book. The next one, number 5, The Pale Horse. The Pale Horse was released in 2020, and it stars Rufus Sewell and Kaya Scodelario. This is the story of an antique dealer, Mark Easterbrook, who is questioned by the police after his name is found on a list made by a woman who was found dead in the street. All people on this list die mysteriously, and their death look like a curse, so we're left wondering, will Mark suffer the same fate? The Pale Horse looks the least like an Agatha Christie adaptation. If I didn't know better, I'd firmly put it into a supernatural thriller category. There are witches, curses, bizarre death, and a horror vibe that is frankly quite refreshing. I binged all these miniseries one after another, so the very dreadful atmosphere of this one really stood out. It also has stunning visuals and so much style, I was drowning in it. And the story really fooled me. I did not expect the twist. I was just as clueless as the main character, so the final reveal was very gratifying. However, this miniseries only has 2 episodes, and the ending felt awfully rushed and uncertain. Don't get me wrong, I love open or ambiguous endings, but The Pale Horse, I believe, would have benefited from something more concrete. Number 4. Why didn't they ask Evans? Why Didn't They Ask Evans is the newest adaptation. It was released in April of 2022, and unlike all the others, it wasn't aired on BBC, it was released on BritBox. Also, as I mentioned, the series was written and directed by Hugh Laurie, who also starred in a minor role. Why Didn't They Ask Evans follows 2 amateur detectives, Vickers' son, Bobby Jones, and his socialite friend, Lady Frankie, who go on a crime-solving adventure after Bobby witnesses a man fallen to his death and hears his enigmatic dying words, words that actually make the title.
Why didn't they ask Evans?
What I really liked about this series is that it's completely different to all the others in tone. It's more of a comedic detective romp, which doesn't treat very serious topics like death and murder very seriously. The main characters are 2 incompetent amateur detectives who are more interested in flirting with each other and who enjoy playing detectives without thinking the consequences through. It's fun to watch them bicker and create shenanigans. It's lighthearted, bright, and thoroughly enjoyable, especially the first 2 episodes, because the last one, episode 3, is what weighs it down. It felt like the show wanted to save all the actual detective story and shocking revelations for the final minutes, so all the explanations and twists are bungled and rushed, and I even had to stop and Google to understand what was happening and who did what. Another thing that made me enjoy it less than I expected to is that by chasing lightheartedness, the show forgot to give the main characters necessary depth. They are fun, but they're a bit superficial, and I couldn't care less about their feelings for each other because they almost came out of nowhere. Or it's just my problem. I need more chemistry and more justification for a romance, like more than just 2 people being heterosexual men and women. That said, Lucy Boynton and Will Poulter were definitely a joy to look at. What a gorgeous couple! The 3rd place goes to The Witness for the Prosecution. The Witness for the Prosecution was released in 2016. It stars Toby Jones, Andrea Riseborough, Billy Howell, and Kim Cattrall. One of the most famous Christie's works, it follows a solicitor, John Mayhew, who takes the case of a young man, Leonard Vole, who is accused of murdering a wealthy socialite, Emily French. I haven't read the short story that it's based on, but I've seen the 1952 Billy Wilder movie with Marlene Dietrich, and thankfully I forgot every plot point.
Do you love your husband?
Leonard thinks I do.
Well, do you?
Am I already under oath?
But I remember the Hollywood glitz and glamour of that adaptation, and this one left a completely opposite impression. It's as unglamorous as it can get. It's gritty, dark, and unpleasant. There isn't a single character you could sympathize with. It feels hopeless, and in that, it's kind of amazing. Also, it's weirdly beautiful in its unattractiveness, if that makes sense. It really relishes in the aesthetic of London's dark underbelly. But this daunting setting, populated by extremely nasty characters, Sure, it can work for someone, but for me it was a bit much. The second place goes to Ordeal by Innocence. Ordeal by Innocence was released in 2018. It boasts the amazing cast of Bill Nighy, Anna Chancellor, Alice Eve, Matthew Good, Luke Treadaway, and many others. Interesting fact about it. I wanted to call it a fun fact, but it's not very fun. Initially, one of the main roles went to Ed Westwick, but after he was accused of sexual assault, all his scenes were reshot with Kristen Cook. It's a tight, whodunit story locked in a confined space of one house. Wealthy heiress Rachel Argyle is murdered in her home, where she lives with her husband, their 5 adopted children, and their maid. One of her children, Jack, is sent to prison for the crime, but suddenly, a year later, the family is visited by a mysterious man who claims that he was Jack's alibi. Chaos ensues. There are so many things that I liked about this miniseries. I liked the setting. A lovely, affluent house with a dysfunctional family inside. A beautiful picture that covers the ugly reality of wealth and privilege. I liked the pace. It never felt boring, and diving deep into the characters' backstories didn't feel like a detour from the main story. And what's more important, I liked the characters. I loved that they were all given backstories that made sense. Their relationships felt real, and literally any one of them could have been a killer without any stretch of imagination. Also, I have to mention the absolute scene stealer, Anthony Boyle, who played Jack. What a magnificent screen presence, especially considering the amount of talent in this show. But the one thing that I didn't like was the murderer reveal. It was too obvious and underwhelming. Listen, I know we like to say that the butler did it, but when a woman is killed, what is your first thought? Exactly. And the first place goes to And Then There Were None. And Then There Were None was the first one of these adaptations. It was released in 2015. It follows a group of strangers who are invited to a secluded island where they are murdered one by one for their past crimes. I think it's not only the best out of all these 6 adaptations, but just one of the best Agatha Christie adaptations of all time. Well, that's just my opinion. I think it has the right balance of a classic detective story, a horror, and a psychological thriller. And I found it interesting that I didn't really care about figuring out who the murderer was and solving the mystery. I was actually more interested in the psychological aspect of it. These characters are told that they're going to be murdered for their past crimes they committed. And the question is, how do they deal with the fact of their mortality? Do they accept it? Do they fight it? Faced with their sins, do they repent? Do they regret? Or do they fully accept every dark aspect of themselves? We have 10 people, 10 characters who seem very proper, well-respected, the kind of people that could easily be heroes. A war veteran, a police officer, a judge, a teacher, a doctor. But as the story progresses, they reveal the darkest sides of human condition, and we realize that no one is immune to the worst aspects of humanity. I loved the character work here. They were disgusting in the best possible way. And as I said, the cast were amazing in all adaptations, but I believe And Then There Were None had the best out of all of them. I mean, it has Charles Dance, Bern Gorman, Sam Neill, Miranda Richardson, Toby Stevens, Noah Taylor, Douglas Booth, and the spellbinding Maeve Dermody in the main role. And yes, Aidan Turner. Aidan Turner in this role wasn't just brilliant, he was also the most attractive man on the planet, I believe. Yeah. So, have you seen any of these? What's your opinion on them? How would you rank them? And what is your favorite Agatha Christie adaptation of all time? Let me know.